What's up, chat? Welcome back to the stream. It's Tuesday. We are getting tactical today, which should be exciting. We're talking about C'tan shards today, one of the higher performing factions over the weekend, being Necrons, and so I have painstakingly gone through basically every single Necron list that was played in competitive events in the last 2 weeks. Anyone that went X1 or better, I went through and took an essay of the lists that were able to defeat it in order to take a peek at what was doing well. And I came back with a couple of surprising results. What could kill for C'tan? 3 Shadow Swords and a Dream. I mean, good luck with that. Maybe that could be the answer. We just haven't tried it yet. That's all that we've learned from that. No one's given it a go. So who knows? So basically what I'm going to be doing is walking through a couple of trends that we can take away from these results. And I've put together my results in this nice little picture right here that includes all of the lists that were able to defeat them. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see there's a bunch of weird outliers. So a bunch of single factions that ended up beating them with random lists. Things like Adeptus Sororitas, Cheat Cults, randomly Imperial Agents. Imperial Agents list actually won an RTT this weekend, and they beat a multiple C'tan shard Necron list to do it. Kind of sick. And these actually, in a large part, point towards some trends that we can uncover in the strategies to beat these styles of C'tan shard lists. Now, part of it is, part of the question we're going to ask ourselves is what kills a C'tan shard, and what are we going to need to use, and what factions are going to be capable of actually destroying them. But the other question is, how do we beat a C'tan shard list? And a lot of these factions are able to do that. Now, unsurprisingly, we also saw some good results from Ultramarines here. In a shocking turn of events, who could have foreseen this coming? Chat, the army that gets 2 Ocean Moments for +1 a wound and is like by far the most powerful army in the game right now. I don't even think it's particularly close. And I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. And even past their nerfs, Ultramarines are really going to be C'tan shards. So a lot of C'tan shard lists went down to Ultramarine lists over the last couple of weeks. Oh, surprise. Shocker. However, the two I want to point out when it comes to defeating these lists and killing them dead are Tau and Death Guard. What's up with that? Now, first of all, Tau's kind of in vogue right now. We did just see them this past weekend. If we put our slide away real quick here. If we look at the top events, right, from the weekend, we saw Tau win a lot of the biggest events. We saw Glenasir take down an event, and also Denver 40K Fight Club won by Tau as well. Tau are killing it right now, and I guess it's not super shocking that they were able to do well. However, what I want to point out are the lists that were particularly capable of killing them. First of all, there isn't a huge through line of just they lost every time they played against Tau Montka, which kind of would make sense, but they also lost to a bunch of other random stuff. So we could take a peek at exactly what those are. Let me grab some lists from my notes here real quick. If I could maybe not have mislabeled some of the links, that would have been great. So, for example, this auxiliary cadre list. This is from the January Haven RTT. Zach Mobley was able to beat a multiple C'tan shard list with just sort of, I don't know, I would say random detachment auxiliary cadre. I guess auxiliary cadre is not unreasonably popular. It does have good synergy between the Tau units and the Kroot units. And it does, you have like a bunch of really good stratagems. You have things like interlocking maneuvers to move at the end of the turn, which is pretty good. But generally speaking, a lot of what it does, besides having Kroot, right, and Kroot that are hard to shoot at and are fast, is it does normal Tau things, right? You have Tau with extra AP, which generally against Necrons doesn't matter. But I will say a couple of things to begin with. First of all, a Riptide Battlesuit, the comparison between a Riptide Battlesuit and something like a Doomsday Arc, if we're not even talking about Tau, about C'tan Shards, or we're talking about beating the army itself, is really funny because they're basically the same unit if they're shooting at each other, except the Riptide Battlesuit has more guns and its gun doesn't shoot a random number of times. So, like, when you're comparing this thing to other big long-range guns in the Necron arsenal, a lot of times the Riptide Battlesuit comes out on top, and you think, well, why is that? Like, a Doomsday Arc's like friggin' strength like 18 or whatever. The thing is that the Iron Accelerator being only strength 10 doesn't matter because Doomsday Arcs are not a high toughness value. So into a lot of the things you're shooting at, these guys are going to be really good. It's also flat 4 damage for all the heavy infantry, for example, that they're bringing. You get a bunch of little guns. It can also stack up additional damage on the relatively low armor save Necron units. And so once you start putting, especially like these random like AP2 ignore cover shots downrange, they start putting most Necron units on their invuln, and they actually start stacking up damage kind of quickly. So I think there is some other considerations to be made here for Tau explicitly into Necrons. Now, I will be the first to mention I don't play Tau, and I don't often play Necrons. And so it's not exactly a matchup that I have a ton of experience with. So if I'm misreading this, I'm sure somebody in the comment section will let me know. But that's what it feels like to me. It feels like Tau have, to begin with, they have some good profiles that are good at killing things like C'tan Shards, and they're also relatively well-suited into a lot of the other styles of Necron units. So the stuff that's backing up a C'tan Shard, Tau can trade shots with it just fine. And at the end of the day, if you kill everything besides a C'tan Shard, they aren't going to be able to win. C'tan Shards are only one individual model, and they are only OC4, and so you can just beat them on primary, and that's just fine. And I think in a lot of cases, that's what happens here. Now, the other thing that Tau can potentially do is they can spam high objective control characteristic units. And I have a list prepared that I want to talk about when we are discussing this. Let's look at this insane list, chat. This is from the Wizards Alley tournament. Jason Mode playing this one. Also beat a C'tan Shard list. And he played Experimental Prototype Cadre, which, if I remember correctly, this is going to basically feed into every single point that I'm about to make in this video. It's extra range on your guns, and then you have a bunch of extra stratagems that you can stack on them to make the guns do cool stuff. So, for example, we can use experimental ammunition to give +1 strength. We can improve strength and armor penetration characteristics in order to give yourself hazardous. You can also use threat assessment analyzer. I don't know why. I was about to say analysisizer. That's not right. The threat assessment analyzer to gain sustained or lethal or sustained and lethal. And then all we have to do is apply that to 50 Fire Warriors. Easy. It's so simple. Anyone could do it. So this particular list, right? You have 1 billion breachers. You can push the breachers to range 16, either sustained lethal or AP2 ignore cover plus strength 7. Now I think if we are comparing this to the specific profile of a big scary star god, strength 6, AP1 ignore cover, wound rerolls that shoots 30 plus. If we are taking Cadre Fireblades, we are in fact shooting, if I remember correctly, the entire Cadre Fireblade unit shoots, I think the 2 gun drones shoot 6 times. The Cadre Fireblade shoots 3 times. Is that right? And then the Breacher team all shoots 30 times. So you're shooting almost 40 shots at usually around strength 6, but they get wound rerolls from their ability. They're range 16, so you can actually get them into that range, and then you can potentially give them lethal hits or sustained hits, whichever. That's basically a perfect profile to deal with a C'tan shard. So if we look at like the new Nightbringer profile, right? He comes in at T11, 3+ save, 4+ invulnerable save, 5+ final pain, -1 damage, and 16 wounds. So if we are comparing the positive profile matchups to this guy, strength 6, AP 1 ignore cover, puts them to exactly winning on 5s, exactly putting them on their invulnerable save without any opportunity to save on a 3. And you don't care about their -1 damage because you are only 1 damage to begin with, outside of explicitly the Cadre Fireblades shots. So this army does, I would suspect, basically. Also, there's just so many units in this army. This army is great. I love this. This army does what I would expect. Basically everything you do not want to see as a C'tan shard. It has an extremely good profile matchup. It has a bunch of individual models, and also it's high OC. So this bringing 50 Fire Warriors, 4 Breacher teams, and a Strike team means that you are going to be able to drop 100 objective control characteristics in relevant positions on the battlefield and simply swarm your opponent. These models want to get up close and personal to shoot you anyway. It's fine. So we are just going to be blasting away, no problem. And the C'tan shards, if we'll notice, they cap at OC4. You can't notice that because I expanded my view and now you can't see his top one profile. But they cap out at OC4. So I think this list in particular, I'm not gonna bury the lead here. I'm basically gonna talk about literally every takeaway I had. Does everything that you want to do to beat a C'tan shard. You want to shoot this particular profile. It seems that medium strength, high volume, 1 damage, lethal hit, or I guess sustained hits with wound rerolls is fine. Is exceptionally good against these guys. Not hugely shocking. The other thing is that OC spam tends to be fairly consistent against them. And then, as an extra bonus, a lot of times the Tau weapon profiles tends to, it seems like, line up with Necron defensive profiles really, really well. So Tau get a little bit of an extra leg up here. In that matchup, but also this Breacher spam sort of list basically does everything that you want to be doing. And if we take that ethos to the other factions that are doing well into them, we can kind of immediately come to the conclusion. 6 Death Guard players beat X1 Necron players over the course of the weekend. And what are Death Guard doing? They're getting up close and personal to you, and they're shooting medium strength, high volume shots with lethal hits in with a bunch of attacks. Let's take a peek at some of those Death Guard lists. In fact, first of all, I want to shout out that a bunch of people beat them with Taliban Summoners, which I think is awesome. It probably also, I think it seems like Demons might be okay, maybe at least a sort of a 50-50 matchup for Necrons. I think there's a lot of benefits in, one way or another, depending on the exact composition of the lists. But it also, somebody just freaked out outside my window. I don't think it picked up with the microphone, but they just laid on their horn. It was very surprising. It feels to me like there's some sort of inherent benefits to playing with demon profiles into these big C'tan shards. You're sort of fighting fire with fire to some extent. So, for example, here is a Taliban summoners list that was able to beat them. This is at the Zunobi XP Grind tournament. David Ong was able to win that matchup, and he was not the only Taliban summoners player this weekend either. With a Chaos Rhino, it's a weird formatting. Oh, I guess because all the characters at the bottom, because they're all allies. So it's a Chaos Rhino, a bunch of Chaos Spawn, a bunch of Fetid Bloat Drone, Heavy Blight Launchers. Here's the thing, too, is that we can get Fetid Bloat Drones to wounding stuff on 3s. You can pull a T11 profile down to, in this list, toughness 8. So if you have any strength 9 weapons, you start winning them with 3s. But heavy blight launcher fed blow drones, very consistently winning toughness 11 on 3s. So you're just like pumping out these lethal hit shots that are also pretty high strength. It's like medium volume, 3 damage. So it does get hit by the -1 damage a little bit. It's inconsistent, but you're probably good for like 4 damage into their defensive characteristic a lot of times. Maybe 3 damage after the feel no pain or something. So that stacks up for sure. Then we also have the Great Unclean Ones. They can stack a toughness debuff with their own a Contagion of Nurgle. Once they have a Death Shroud, or a Death Guard model nearby them, they gain Contagions of Nurgle. So they naturally drop your toughness by 1. Then they can also use their own Nurgle's Rot to drop your toughness by an additional 1. If you really need to, you can do that with the second Great Unclean One too. But that means that suddenly, against a T11 profile, Great Unclean One's winning on 3s with lethal hits, and is kind of awkward to hit in the crackback, especially if you pick -1 to be hit as your Contagion yourself. So they can sort of hyper tank. The Nightbringer rocks up. He's feeling strong. A Great Unclean One, 6-inch deep strikes with Beckoning Blight. It charges directly into him. It trucks him for like 10 damage, and then he misses a bunch of attacks in the swing back and dies on the subsequent turn.
Young 6,931 donated $2.
Thank you for the super chat.
6-man DST with lock overkill everything base.
For whatever reason, I wonder if my headset is not connected. I did not get that in my headset, but I think it would play on the stream. Let me reset real quick. Thanks for the super chat. 6 Destro Terminators with Lord of Contagion. Yeah, I mean, you're going to kill basically whatever. The downside is that you do get the, like, you are swinging 2 damage attacks into the -1 damage, but you are attacking so many times, right? Like Lethal Sustained Lance. Like, you're winning them on, what's the Death Shroud Terminator's like base strength? They're strength 8. Is that right? Oh, they're strength 9. But in some cases you can get them winning on 3s. They're strength 8. So if you apply every toughness debuff, you can get them winning on 3s. Otherwise, they win on 4s. And I guess you sweep probably, right? Yeah, I think you just sweep attack. Then you don't care about the -1 damage, and you just attack a million times. Yeah, that actually is probably fine. That does seem like it would be very good. Now that I'm looking at it, we just talked about how mass attacks with lethal hits, very strong. Oh, look at that. These guys swing 8 times a piece. What a shocker. Whoop. Yeah, that seems very good. That does seem very good. We do have 1 Lord of Virulence to go with the Death Shroud Terminators in this list, and then we're also running Rodagus, a bunch of Plague Bears and stuff. Rodagus actually got a weird nerf in this matchup, by the way. I was really like conceptualizing it earlier today because I was thinking about playing the matchup. Rodagus has a damage bonus effect that he applies to Nurgle demons. So he can point at an enemy and you get +1 damage with your Nurgle demons against it for the entire fight phase. Which is fine. It especially helps out like the Great Unclean Ones, like knife attacks go from damage 2 to damage 3, then they're actually doing multi-damage into a -1 damage profile. But the weird thing is that previously, against the half damage, it actually wasn't affected because you could then swing in with like Poxwalkers or something that would swing with lethal hits or bunch of lethal hits attacks at AP1, which is a very good profile. They would hit you. The old Necrodermis rule would half damage, then you would add Rodagus's bonus damage, and then they would hit you for 2 damage anyway. Which was good. It meant Poxwalkers were actually good for like 4 or 5 damage into a lot of like the C'tan Shard style of unit, which was pretty wild. However, now that it has changed to a damage subtraction, subtraction always comes last on the characteristic modifier sequence. You do replacement, division, addition, subtraction. So you add his damage from 1 to 2 on any of their 1 damage attacks, then the C'tan Shard's ability reduces it back to 1. So you're like, no! I used to be so powerful, and now I just punch it for a strength 10 lethal hit, 4 damage, which goes to 3. Terrible. Absolutely unplayably trash. Which is like a weird, funny, like that's very extremely matchup specific, but obviously not that big of a deal. Does -1 damage work against Devastating Wounds? It does. It does indeed. It feels like it shouldn't, because Devastating Wounds like converted to Mortal Wounds, and it feels like Mortal Wounds should just be their own thing. However, it's explicit in the rules commentary that anything that modifies damage characteristics modify the damage characteristic of the attack, which is what converts into Mortal Wounds. So it is still affected. Which I don't know. It makes sense, but it is conceptually a little bit weird. Let me see if we can take a peek at another Death Guard list here. That is doing pretty well. And then we can talk about some of the funnier ones. All right, so we also had Justus de Gironheim. I don't know, Gironheim? Something like that. Number 1, Kiko Fra won the matchup with Death Guard running Champions of Contagion. So this is the one where you get to switch your contagion all the time, so you can flop around whatever you want. And this one had a bunch of Plague Marines. I think this is a little bit more representative of what you would typically see, but I thought it was very relevant to talk about how good the Great Unclean One is in the fight against C'tan Shards, especially Great Unclean One that can project -1 to hit. That's actually wild. So in this case, we're running 30 Plague Marine, or excuse me, 25 Plague Marines. This is a unit of 5. We have them in Chaos Rhinos, so we could get fire support, so we could be winning. We could be rerolling wounds as well. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I get the they can also be lethal sustaining on 5s in this detachment as well. You can apply a 5-up critical hits to a Death Guard attached unit from your army. I always could get that confused with all the stratagems for whatever reason between Virulent Victorium and Champions of Contagion. There's a lot of like pseudo duplicate stratagems, and so I always get confused between the two. But they do have a 5+ critical effect. So if you use the full, I guess you don't need the full combo. We are running Biolega's Putrefires though, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Because they'll apply 5-up lethal hits, and then you get 5-up lethal sustained out of these guys anyway. But you can use it on the Dash Shroud Terminators, so you can be like lethal sustaining on 5s with them with lance attacks. Also extremely spooky, so that seems fine. And then we got Heavy Bloat Drone. Heavy Blight Launcher Fetid Blow Drones, not quite as good with only 1 toughness debuff to stack, but you can still be wounding T11 on 4s. They're probably another example of a unit that's like particularly good at shooting into things like Doomsday Arcs again. They're good into especially a lot of the heavy infantry, so like mass damage 3 is okay into stuff like Canoptic Wraiths. It's very good into things like Locust or Scorpec Destroyers, and then you also get a good profile matchup into Doomsday Arcs because you could just overload their invulnerable save. Even with cover, they're still only saving on 4s, and you're winning them exactly on 3s, even without Contagion. So if you could get these guys to reroll hits, and 2 of them with their powers combined could tune up a Doomsday Arc pretty well. I don't know if they kill it. Depends on your shot count, obviously, but if you roll well enough, you could. Mephitic Blight Haulers as well, plus a bunch of Poxwalkers on top of that. But just generally speaking, like, if your game plan is to frontline with the C'tan, and most of the lists that we're talking about today, I should mention, most of the lists are running, I would say probably 50% of them were running 3 C'tan that they just like frontlined with, and some of them were Pantheons of Woe that ran 4, and then occasionally they were like Star Shadow Arsenal that just ran like Void Dragon plus Nightbringer just for melee counterpunch. But any of the listed are frontlining the C'tan, and we talked about a couple of them where they just basically put 3 C'tan Shards plus like Silent King or something in the middle of the table, say go, and then shoot you with Doomsday Arcs from the back line, and that's where their damage comes from. If your game plan is explicitly to tank with the C'tan Shards and you run into this offensive profile, you just cry. Because these guys just have so many lethal hit attacks with access to rerolls, with access to all these bonuses. There's a pretty reasonable chance that they just 1-for-1 a C'tan Shard, which is exactly the profile that you don't want to see, and that is exactly why this happens, where you just lose the Death Guard matchup a billion times. So sorry, Necrons. Death Guard looking pretty spooky for you today. Ultramarines we already spoke about momentarily. I don't think it's really it's necessary to talk about that quite as much. However, I do think it's relevant to talk about demons. I believe that 2/3 of the demon wins into them. It's only 3. Like, we're talking about just minuscule sample sizes here, so it comes down to a lot of like what happens in individual matchups. A lot of the demons are playing Scintillating Legion, which seems okay. Scintillating is another example of an army that is good into a lot of these. So this is from Palm Springs Open. I ended up going down to Scintillating Legion. Here's the list. It's another example of an army that's particularly good into the backline elements. So like Lords of Change, all they want to be doing literally all the time is shooting at like Necron utility stuff. You can Pyrogenesis one of them to like super duper, like just like turbo nuke a C'tan Shard. You're not going to kill it, but you're going to do 1 trillion damage because you're firing 15 times. 9 of those with sustained D3. You don't need to ignore cover on them. You don't need extra. You don't need bonus AP, which is nice. 9 of them are going to be sustained D3, wounding on 3s for 3 damage down to 2. You're like good for. You're probably giving them like, I don't know, 7 damage onto their field of pain. So like 1 Lord of Change gets close to like halfway killing a C'tan Shard. And if you stack up all the Lords of Change on it, the other 2 that don't get Pyrogenesis are not quite as exciting because they don't win on 3s. But if you just stack up enough on them, you can eventually kill them. It's another instance though where if they give you the line to like the Doomsday arcs, for example, a Lord of Change can pretty like. A Lord of Change could spike to the point, and it's not even that crazy, where they just one-tap a Doomsday Arc. So it's a situation where these weapon profiles, while they're okay into the C'tan Shards, they're not perfect, like we talked about with some of the other ones. They are good at killing all the other stuff. And then the weird thing about Demons is that they're doing a lot of the same things that the C'tan want to be doing, which is that they're just like spiking a lot in their invulnerable save. And C'tan Shards typically specialize in at least Void Dragon and the Nightbringer. They specialize very much on low volume, high impact attacks, which is exactly not what you want to run into a full army-wide invulnerable save into. So they're really inconsistent. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the fight between like Mass C'tan and Mass Greater Demons ends up coming down to a lot of your individual save rules. It's just a bunch of activations, each of which could swing the game wildly one way or another, depending on invulnerable saves. And you're just like throwing it, you're just handing it to the Chaos Gods and hoping for the best. The problem though for Demons, for Necrons and for C'tan Shards versus Demons is, it sort of brings me to my next point, is that Demons, if we will take a look here, chat, have a very important objective control value. If we look at a Lord of Change, they are OC5. A Nightbringer is only OC4. So, even though the Nightbringer is more expensive and less voluminous than a Greater Demon, right? You're probably only bringing 3 C'tan Shards. They will lose out the OC battle to every single Greater Demon in the game. It doesn't matter. They don't even have to engage with you. The C'tan Shard could just bounce his big, stupid, silly strike attack off your invulnerable save every turn. But as long as he doesn't kill you, you're out OCing him. And so he will never take that objective from you until one of you is dead. So all you have to do as a demon player is kill all the other stuff. You kill literally everything else in the army. And these guys can't take the objectives from you. They can't do it unless they straight up just murder you. And as we talked about, murdering basically identical offensive profiles is very inconsistent. You're coming down to a lot of dice. So this matchup in particular feels like it could be fairly dicey, one way or another. But the OC problem for C'tan Shards means that they have a tough time actually winning out in the late game, especially if you kill their smaller utility units. And if we go back to our big list of factions here, we will see something very interesting. A lot of these lesser played factions that still did fairly well in the matchup, I want to say things like Tyranids, Drukhari, Imperial Agents, Harlequins. I want to talk about this Iron Hands list because it's a fucking trip. Even to a lesser extent, things like Astral and Salamanders, all of them focus very heavily on objective control play. All they do, for the most part, is throw OC2 bodies everywhere. And if you're playing Necrons, you get into a shooting battle with their artillery. You know, Tyranid armies playing stuff like, I think all the Tyranid lists that went undefeated here were Invasion Fleet. So you're playing stuff like Exocrines and Tyranofexes. You will eat some damage from a Doomsday Arc, and then your counter battery, because your units are free, is probably going to kill a Doomsday Arc. You clear out the Doomsday Arcs and you start to clear out the utility units that your lighter units can actually fight, and then suddenly these C'tan shards are trying to peel themselves out of an infinite number of termagants, and they can't do it. Drukhari's going to do something similar. They're going to contest your objective from the Nightbringer with like 2 witches, and you're just not going to be able to hold the objective. And you're going to with half of your points characteristic or points value in 3 models. If you're taking 3 C'tan shards, Nightbringer, Deceiver, and Void Dragon, then you don't have the unit count to contend with a Drukhari army that is literally filling the entire table with dedicated transports and models. Let's see if we can grab a Drukhari list to take a peek at here. One of them didn't submit their list, which always makes me sad. Here we go. This is from the BK Games tournament. It's a Spectacle of Spite. We've got triple Succubus, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 units of Witches, plus 3 Venoms. So we have the Venoms themselves, 2 Venoms or a Venom plus 1 Witch can contest objective from a C'tan shard. And you're also getting 6 units of 5 Witches, and any one of those can contest from a C'tan shard. Assuming that you're somewhere around full strength. You do have like the Hellions are probably like sort of inconsistent at dealing damage. I mean, your damage into them is like probably really weird. Because you're relying a lot on like these like awkward 2 damage weapons. They are AP 1 and they have 1,000,000 attacks. So they will probably, like, with their powers combined, they can probably kill these things. But a lot of times I think all you need to do is push around and kill all the other stuff first. And then the C'tan shards aren't really going to be able to compete with you on the primary objective. Same for Reavers. Reavers, bring 6 OC by themselves for 70 points, and they can out-OC a Nightbringer or something on an objective, essentially for free. They also do mortal wounds too, which is also helpful. If you're dealing with this -1 damage, invulnerable save stuff, just inflicting flyover mortals constantly is certainly going to help. And then I guess we're not focusing on the Scourges here. The Darkland Scourges would be okay, but again, it's very inconsistent because you don't know how many of those are going to be pushing through the invulnerable save. But at the very least, you just have incredible amounts of objective control, and that's the final piece of the puzzle. So if we look at our results here, we can very clearly see that armies that are good at A, objective control characteristic at the midboard, B, mass, low, like sort of medium weight, lethal hits attacks, or like wound rerolling attacks, for example, are very good. And then that's mostly it. And then also just armies that can profitably engage with the rest of the Necron army. And I think that's very interesting. Tau is not what I expected to be at the top of the list here. I was like, I assume Ultra Brains, sure, I get it. Death Guard does make sense. What's interesting though is that Death Guard they got this matchup a billion times, and they were very, very successful at it. Despite the fact that Death Guard, I don't think has a huge play rate right now, right? They're kind of like mid currently. I think their stock is going up a little bit. But I think Death Guard is like a little bit awkward, but we can definitely see it with things like Tyranids, Drukhari, even to a lesser extent, Emperor's Children. Emperor's Children's like, I'm dealing mortal wounds, I'm doing lethal hits with my Lord Exultants, and I'm shooting like 1 trillion times with Noise Marines, and I'm gonna be able to like eventually overload your save characteristics. Plus, I'm pretty good at objective control, right? If you're just throwing Tormentors and Infractors onto objectives over and over again, you're not incredibly you're doing a good job at keeping them off balance on primary. And some of these other detachments or some of these other factions are also going to do that. They did lose to the Salamanders list at I'm going to grab the list real quick at New Year's Knockout last week that I believe we talked about, that ran a bunch of Infernus Marines. Go grab the list here. So this was the Forge Father Seekers list that we discussed. That was really cool. I talked about it on my best armies in 40K. There's a couple of benefits that Salamanders have in this matchup. I think this matchup is generally favorable for Salamanders for a couple different reasons. First of all, if you're in Forge Father Seekers, their Infernus Marines go to strength 6 and can get wound rerolls. So it's basically a higher volume version of the breachers we talked about earlier. So their base strength 5 AP 1, ignore cover. So they always put a C'tan shard on their invulnerable save. And you're winning on 5s instead of 6s, which is huge. And then you can give them devastating wounds and rerolls from Vulcan. So they themselves like cook half a C'tan shard basically by itself. And then the other thing is that with Vulcan Heston, they go to OC2. And so they sort of 1-2 punch. They're very good at taking the objective and holding it. And they're also good at actually just cooking the C'tan shard defensive profile pretty well. So like Vulcan will put in a C'tan shard, it'll almost certainly die that turn. You have to give a bunch of stuff to do it, but sometimes you can threat overload a Necron army to the point that they can't deal with all your shit. Because they tend to only be a couple of like very meaningful activations, right? It's like Silent King, it's like the Doomsday Arcs, it's like a couple of C'tan shards, and then their little stuff is like gonna poke at you, but it's not necessarily gonna like straight up kill a lot of these defensive profiles. If you play this in Firestorm Assault Force, instead, you get most of the same benefits. You lose Immolator, so you lose the extra attack in your Flamers. So this is the list running double Librarians. So we have a devastating wound weapon off the Librarians, and then he gives a 4+ invulnerable save to the Infernus Marine units. So they can put 21 OC onto an objective and then protect it with like Overwatch. They can reactively embark into their repulsors, and they can they have a 4+ invuln, so they're relatively resilient to shooting. So they're very good at taking territory. But the other thing is that if you play in Firestorm, you could put the Champion of Humanity Lieutenant inside the Blade Guard Veteran squad here, and they get ignore modifiers entirely. So they're 2 damage, like mass 2 damage weapons with Adrax to get rerolls. Straight up will just, I think probably just one shot a C'tan shard. I haven't done the math, but you're attacking with like, it's 5, 2 damage, weapon skill 2 attacks from the Lieutenant. It all has lethal hits, and then if you Crucible Battle wounds on 5s and full wound rerolls, you have 5 of those. You have 5 3 damage attacks from Adrax, and you have 24 2 damage attacks from the Blade Guard. So, assuming you're rerolling 1s, you're probably good for like 20-ish hits out of the Blade Guard Veteran squad. Of those, you'll get like 4 lethals, and then 5s rerolling is like a 50% conversion. So you're handing like 12 saves from the Blade Guard Veterans alone. And the Lieutenant's probably 1 to 2 saves, and Andrax is probably another 3 saves. Any of those failures is hits for full damage. So this unit is almost certainly, without even needing Oath of Moment, going to kill a C'tan shard by itself. If you're in Firestorm Assault Force, it only does about half that damage in Forge Father Seekers because you don't get ignore modifiers, but you do get this guy who's going to be better in a lot of other cases. So you'll win some, and in some cases, you do lose some as well. So Salamander's pretty good here. We can talk about Black Templars also are in there. I don't know if I actually put them into the sheet. I didn't talk about them, but it's kind of a similar deal, right? You're like +1 to wound against high toughness stuff, and then you have like lethal hits and rerolls. Repulsor Executioners shoot 1,000,000 times. You can get AP1 ignore cover in Gladius Task Force, so you can overload any sort of invulnerable save protected stuff, and then we're running like these big Assault Intercessor squads with Castle and Marshal combos. So we get 5+ critical. I guess, yeah. It's 5+. Well, I guess these guys don't get a critical effect built in, right? Oh, they're Sword Brethren, excuse me. With chain swords. Interesting. That's cool. I think that the Sword Brother and Chain Sword profile is like 7 attacks, if I remember correctly. Grab his data sheet real quick. With sustained hits, it's not, you don't see it. Oh, it's 6 attacks, excuse me. You don't see it very often, but it's actually kind of baller. So like these 4 dudes are attacking 24 times with sustained, critical 5s and full rerolls. And then you have the 2 lethal hit power weapons in there as well that will also like critical 5s and full rerolls. So it's a much higher volume of attacks, and then you're winning on 5s because you can get +1 to wound with the what's the word? Templar Vow, excuse me. And you're putting them on their invuln. So it's not quite as, I don't think it's as much damage in that case. You don't care about the -1 damage, but it's not lethal hit, so you have to roll to wound. So like you're good for 5+ criticals, and fishing is like 36 hits probably, or 34 or something like that. And then you're winning on 5, so you're handing them like 12 saves. I guess it's okay. It's not that exciting. They only take like 4 damage from that. The strength 4 really kills them. Oh, but you can +1 a wound in Gladius House Course. You can lance them. Oh, that doesn't matter. Just kidding. Excuse me. That doesn't matter if they get +1 a wound because they already have +1 a wound. That's why they're winning on 5s. Womp womp. The big 20-man Crusader bricks are what kill C'tan? Yeah, 100% for sure. That definitely is gonna do it. Especially like the Helbrecht brick is good. Because he can inflict mortals, right? Which is probably good for like 3 to 4 damage to begin with, and then you swing with the unit. Or if you get the like critical 5 like full reroll combo, they just go insane. Emperor's Champion, I'm sure, is good there too as well, because he has his bonuses against characters and stuff too.
$5 through Super Chat. Stop building up the Repex, 2 of them unload into a 10-man warrior squad with Grimner and only killed 2 corvs. Repex kind of suck.
Stop building up the Repulsor Executioner. Refexes suck? I think that's a hot take, chat. I definitely don't think they're like the be-all end-all of like they're gonna kill the entire world. But I definitely I think that like shooting into what ends up being a 3+ like high toughness unit is not the ideal target that they want to be shooting at, right? They want to shoot at like light infantry, and like Hearthkin warriors are really awkward to kill for those guys. The big thing is that you get the full reroll like anti-tank shooting, right? You have 4 if you include the multi-melter shots in there. They have 4 like big anti-tank shots that get baked in hit rerolls, and that's like really what you're bringing them for. The additional anti-infantry damage is mostly flavor. In a lot of cases, right? You're good for like you'll like chunk down a Space Marine or 2 on average, but it's not going to like kill the entire world. Unless you play like Iron Storm Spearhead potentially and give them like lethal hits or something. Then they go pretty cool. But I definitely I think it would be hot to take that to say that the Black Templar Repulsor Executioner sucks. It's not a world killing super weapon, but it is very strong. All right. So with that out of the way, there are a couple of interesting side things that I want to talk about. Let's look at. Oh, I also don't know if I put World Eaters on my big list here. I think I might have forgotten. World Eaters had, I think, 2 undefeated or 2 wins in that matchup as well, too. Which was too bad I left that in. I left that out, but it's another thing where they could get sustained or lethal hits, and they could just like overload their save characteristic. Plus, if they have bonus damage on like Exalted 8-bound, they can go to 3 damage, which will actually do multi-damage, wounds into a -1 damage profile, which has been definitely very helpful as well. We can look at a World Eaters list that was successful there momentarily. Oh, one of them was Core Demon Kid, actually. That's surprising, chats. I don't know if there's anything particular about that list that is good. You can't take Rend Masters in there, so it's like, I don't know. Might be another situation where being able to control objectives with like summoned by Slaughter is nice. It was a Winged Demon Prince with Blade of Endless Bloodshed. +1 strength, attack, and damage, so he goes to 4 damage. Each time he destroys a unit, you gain blood tithe automatically. Then we have Angron, Bloodthirster, Scarbrand. Fuck. This list rules. Double Chaos Spawn Jackals and a Lord of Skulls. The new meta has arrived. It's 5 big fucking idiots. That's great. That's great. Is the Lord of Skulls good in that matchup? Is he? What is this? He always feels very short range. So he took Cleaver, Hades, Gatling Cannon, and Demon Gore Cannon. Also the 18-inch range gun. Problem here is D6 shots, which is really, really awkward. And then Hades Gatling Cannon is 8/2/2. So like Masonero just like eats it. You shoot other stuff, I guess. I guess that's good at killing like the utility stuff, and you can chunk the guys with the big cannon if you get lucky. And then you just like hope your invulnerable saves hold up, and you just beat them up. This list is fun. That's incredible. I was unprepared. I was wholly unprepared for the unhinged nature of this list here. The funny part about looking at like individual game results is that sometimes you just get real like weird stuff. The big one was at Glasshammer GT. They lost to Richard Kilpatrick, who ended up doing very well, I believe. Can we grab the results from that? Ooh. Oh, he did okay. He did tie his final round to not go X1, unfortunately. Although, was it a natural tie? I saw a lot of like randomly. There were a lot of like natural draws. No, this one was that was a different matchup though. I saw a lot of natural draws that ended up actually like being, or excuse me, WTC differential scoring draws that actually ended up being natural draws, which was like surprising. Space Wolves versus World Eaters, almost a natural draw. 82-83. He did win the game. Woo, woo. But he beat Necrons over the course of the weekend, and he was playing Berserker Warband. Excuse me. I'm gonna sneeze real quick, or am I? Maybe not. Maybe I'm not gonna sneeze. Maybe I'm too strong for sneezes. He's running Karn, a Juggernaut Lord, Slaughterbound with Glaive, 30 Khorne Berserkers. That's for the Juggy Lord to deliver with the extra movement he gives him. A Chaos Rhino for Karn, triple 8-bound, double Exalted 8-bound, excuse me. A Hell Brute, sick. That guy's gonna get one shot, but it's cool though. Goremongers and Jackals. Neat. Yeah, this unit itself, like you can get sustained lethal hits on them, and they just attack so many times, especially because they go to strength 6 with the detachment ability. That there is a pretty reasonable chance that they will straight up just kill a C'tan Shard. Just make it dead in one go. Boop. Just boop it right on the head. And he goes down. So that makes sense to me. You gotta deliver them, but you have Apoplectic Frenzy for Advance in Charge in this detachment, so it's fine. It's probably okay. Advance in Charge of the Move at 10 guy that run all the way in. Just throw 200 guardsmen at the problem. 100%. That is very good. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're getting to here with like a lot of these will just be able to out OC. All right. Speaking of throwing guardsmen at the problem, Chance, I have a very funny list to share. This list, it was either feast or famine with them, but they did they beat a C'tan Shard build with a 100-point victory. Let me grab this list because I love it. Here it is. This list either went. It either won big. It all of its wins. It went 3-2. This is, by the way, Abraham Thierry from First Blood CDMX down in Mexico. This list either won with 100 points or it lost horribly. All its losses were like 30 point. Like he scored like 30, and then if he won, it was 100. So it was Hammer of Avernii, with a Steel Front Terminator Ancient, so +1 OC, and he can regenerate Terminators back to his unit once in your command phase, or once each command phase. Each of your command phases, I guess. We have Canik Var, and then Ironfather Fieros with the Tech Marine. Important thing here is that Ironfather Fieros amps the OC characteristic of heavy intercessor squads. So you can beef them up to like their T6. A lot of times they have a built-in AP reduction effects because they get the bonus against 1 wound or 1 damage attacks if they're holding an objective. And then they're like, I don't know, they have okay shooting. They have just like heavy bolt rifle shots that are like randomly 2 damage and stuff. but they're also 15 OC for 100 points. And you just run them around. We're on a bunch of assault intercessors with jump backs, two ballistic dreadnoughts, infiltrator squad, squad, the big Terminator squad, a big Vanguard veteran squad, plus Calidus assassin. This detachment, because it's based off of First Company Task Force, it has a lot of benefits for veteran units. So being able to buff the veterans with like +1 to wound is huge here. And then the same for the Terminators. The Terminators can also gain Scout. At least I believe they can. Somebody brought up to me, and maybe somebody in chat can back me up with this. I don't know. Somebody brought up to me that the wording on Canik Var's ability to give a unit Scout is really fucked. Because it works at the start of the declare battle formation step. So it works before, I believe. I'll fact check myself here. I believe. Actually, I'm fairly confident in this because I looked this up for a rules question the other day. That it happens before you assign leaders to a unit. So if he applies Scout to a unit, right, you're like to the Terminator squad, and then you attach a leader, it stands to reason that the leader would not gain Scout. So I'm not sure it's 100% legal to scout the Terminator squad if you're attaching all the characters into it. I don't know that for sure, though. I don't know if there's a rules commentary or something that allows the characters to gain Scout. There is rules commentary explicit that if the unit has Scout on its data sheet and the character doesn't, they don't Scout. That is very clear. But it feels like it should apply to everyone attached to the unit, but it doesn't necessarily say that. So this might be fucked, actually, which I'm not 100% sure about. Somebody had that question the other day. I was like, you might be right. That's actually really annoying. But he gives lethal hits against monsters and vehicles, which is good. You can get devastating wounds, which is also good, and you can get +1 to wound, +1 to hit and wound on these guys from the detachment once you've lost any models. It's +1 to hit naturally, and then if you've lost a model, you're also +1 to wound. So this unit will chunk down big stuff just fine. Assuming you can Scout, they can push them directly up in the middle of the table, jail your opponent, and then put 15 OC on all the objectives of the heavy intercessors. Which seems pretty good. So it does a lot of the things we talked about being good. Like this unit is probably good for, if not killing a C'tan chart, beating the shit out of them. This unit. This unit, also not that bad, I guess. But then you can out-OC them fairly confidently as well, at least before they get stuck in on the heavy intercessors. They will kill them fairly quickly, but they do have to perfectly convert. So, I don't know. I thought this list was fun. I like Hammer of Avernii. It's pretty cool. Am I saying GW can't write rules? I think so. Yeah. So, I have to dig in and see if there's any precedent for that ability, because I think there is a not unreasonable chance that it does not actually give your unit Scout. If you have attached a character. If you don't attach characters, obviously it's fine. Which means it would be good for like the Vanguard veterans and stuff, but not the Terminators, which is where I've seen it used most often. Uh-oh. Does Canik Var get to retarget if he kills an attached unit without killing the leader? Get to retarget? Oh, retarget the Oath of Moment? I believe how it works. I have a sneaking suspicion that Hammer of Avernii is not in. Oh, no, it is. So I believe this rule is nebulous. It's the same as Rebooting Gilliman's rule, I believe. I think the correct way that it works is that because this clause explicitly moves your Oath of Moment target, right? That unit becomes your Oath of Moment target, right? It doesn't say becomes an Oath of Moment target, it just says becomes your Oath of Moment target. When the bodyguard, because it's an effect that triggers when a unit is destroyed, when the bodyguard unit is killed, it is treated separately from the character. So you would choose the new target for Canik Var, or for the Oath of Moment with Canik Var, and then the character would no longer become the Oath of Moment target. I think is the I've seen it ruled a couple different ways. I think that's how like WTC rules it. I can't remember now, but I believe that is the correct ruling. It's super weird because you could also say it's a persistent effect, so he would retain the effect of Oath of Moment until your next turn. But because this ability implies that you have a single Oath of Omen target, right? Then it would not remain on the original character. Yeah, that's a weird one though. I don't think it's ever been answered, because there is a not unreasonable ruling to say that both he and the new unit are the Oath of Omen target, but I don't know if that's intentional, because it could be interpreted as a persistent effect that would stick around on the character. It comes up very rarely though. Played a C'tan spam with BTF Templars. Oh, Bastion Task Force? 20-man Crusader Squad, lethal hits. Killing is kind of easy. Yeah, for sure. The Bastion Task Force Templars seem actually kind of legit. We talked about them yesterday, and I don't know. I'm curious to see where that can go. I'm also curious to see if there's any other places that detachment could be taken. I was like, what if we like spammed Grey Hunters? They're clearly not as good as big Crusader squads, but it's like, well, now I'm looking at all the weird, stupid battle line units that different Space Marine chapters have in a different light. I don't know. Could be fun, chat. Or just a bunch of Assault Intercessors. It's also interesting too. It specifies the unit gets scout, not models of the unit get scout. Once the attached leader gets added to the unit, it would get the scout buff. Maybe. I don't know. That's not generally how it would work, I think. Because like applying an effect to a unit applies it to all the models in that unit. And so because you apply before the character's attached, in theory, the models in the affected unit have the scout ability, but the character wouldn't. But I don't know if that's intentional. Hoping Necrons get all the attention, but don't want Crusaders to get nerfed. No, I think it's probably fine. I think there's going to be a lot of situations where your opponent's going to be good at killing Crusade squads, and then you're just like, well, this sucks. We'll see. I'm interested. Crusade squads aren't like invincible, which is definitely good. Although the -1 would affect absence. Would that not count as a persistent effect? No, it is not a persistent effect. A persistent effect explicitly has a what's the word? Deadline. Like it has an expiration time. So like until your next command phase, or for example, is a persistent effect. It doesn't either way though. Persistent effects only flip over the character to an attached leader if the leader is attached.
Just want to say thanks for being awesome and making my days a bit better.
Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you, bud. Making days a little better in 2026. I'm doing my best. Appreciate it. Thanks for the $10. All right, folks. Let me take a peek and see if there is anything else that I want to cover, but I think that is mostly. Oh, I want to talk about Harlequins real quick. Harlequins, it's going to be very similar to to the like Spectacle of Spite. It's basically Spectacle of Spite with extra steps, essentially. But we did see a Serpent's Brood list do well in the matchup, which made me kind of happy. It was kind of nice to see. I think a lot of the case, it's just going to be like mass Harlequin troops running around. I can't remember. This will certainly not tell me, but Harlequin troops started OC1. I can't remember if they get an OC bonus from Serpent's Brood. Unfortunately, we're on 39k, and that never tells you because it has some errors in it. So I'll have to check. Survey says yeah, it does give them an objective control characteristic of 2 and battle line keyword. So your troops become very good at taking objectives. They're probably not very good at fighting C'tan shards. However, they are good at killing everything else in the army. That's for sure. You just ronk in a bunch of anti-infantry neurodisruptors and fusion pistol shots, then kill them with devastating wounds. Starweavers, essentially just another version of Venom, right? So we just have a million of these little tiny units inside OC2 transports. And you can just Like I guess a Shining Spur is an interesting inclusion here. You can. Does it affect? Does the attachment really affect the Shining Spears? I assume it doesn't, right? No, Harlequin mounted vehicle. So it doesn't give them sustained. That would be cool if it was Eldar mounted vehicle, but that would just be a Wind Rider host attachment then. But yeah, I don't know. You could kill all the other stuff. Like Haywire Cannon's incredibly good against things like Doomsday Arcs. You just punch through there and won't save and hand them flat mortal wounds. Incredibly strong, unless they have Amintar nearby to help them. They're just going to eat the shots. And then you can kill everything else and contest the objectives with the troops for days, and that's probably what you're doing. Pretty cool. So it's triple Troop Master, 1 Solitaire, just, what is it, 6 Harlequin troops and 5 Star Weavers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. So you have 1 ground pounding unit and then 5 Star Weavers that are just going to be hanging out, and then double Ranger, double Shining Spear, double Sky Weaver. Pretty cool stuff, chat. Successful in the matchup as well. What kind of Emperor's Children's List one? I can take a peek. Emperor's Children lists are mostly kind of Emperor's Children lists. At 40k Fight Club, Frank Guerra beat them, which is Coterie of the Conceited, 3 Winged Demon Princes, 3 Infractor Exultant Bricks, 3 Noise Marine Squads, 3 Chaos Rhinos. That's a list, chat. One of the lists of all time. These guys can stack up mortal wounds really well, which is nice. So, that's definitely gonna punch some damage through a damage reduction effect. Pretty good. Plus, like, you're just like mass 5 of critical sustained lethal. If you can farm their utility units for coterie points, if all they give you is the C'tan shards, you're not going to kill them easily. So the coterie, it gets awkward to like coterie up. However, once you're there, you hit like such a truck, you're actually going to like hit for a ton of damage. But these guys have like a bunch of lethal head attacks. Like that's very helpful too. The Noise Marines are incredibly good against all their lighter units. You can probably 2-for-1 with Noise Marines, especially once you're like 1 or 2 ranks down in the coterie roster. Once you get rerolls, you can have the Sonic Blasters kill like a unit of 5 idiots, right? You know, like Flayed Ones or something. And then you turn around and the Blastmasters kill like Locust Destroyers or something. And you get a 2-for-1 out of that unit. That can be big too. So it's another situation where I think you just like leave the C'tan shards to like kill your Infractor squads until you're at the point where the Demon Prince is going to one-shot them. And then you just get in and you're like, blam, a bunch of mortal wounds, blam, lethal sustained, flip a 6 with Pledge of Unholy Fortune, get another lethal sustained, you know, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff, chat. Good times. Indeed. Amintar is just psychic? I don't think that's true. Am I wrong? No. Psychic attacks and mortal wins. Get out of here, chat. Get out of here. What are you doing? You trying to lead me astray? For posterity, this is the thing. So it works on devastating. Any kind of devastating or explosions or whatever. No. It works pretty well. Every comp is triple Winged Demon Princes, triple Noise Marines, 2 Infractors, 2 Tormentors. A little bit of variety, yeah. It's true. I mean, when you print a codex with like 3 good data sheets in it, you just spam the 3 good data sheets. Like, I don't know what else you're supposed to do. What are we going to take? A Slanesh Sorcerer? Okay. No, I don't think so. We can look at real quick. I saw somebody asked a question about Tyranids. We can look at Tyranids momentarily here as well. Can grab one of the Tyranid lists that did okay. I think it was mostly like just lots of invasion fleet stuff. Here we go. So this one won it. This is from Toys of Mass Destruction, Andy Jones. Had double Broodlord, Adapted Biology Hive Tyrants. Biovore, Exocrine, 2 units of Gene Stealers to go with the Broodlords. Double Norn Emissary. Nice. Tyrannifex, Von Ryan Sleepers. The Emissary is probably pretty good at tanking them too, just because of the 5+ Fino Pain. They also have a 4+ against mortals. So when They have protection when Nightbringer crits them, and they have protection against all of the like the drain effects that he has. So that can be handy. Plus, you can get army-wide lethal hits against monsters. So all these little guys can just be swinging like a trillion damage in, which is nice. The Gene Stealers also being devastating wounds is relevant too, because they're attacking like a bunch of devastating wound attacks. So they're gonna go in and they'll put in like, I don't know, if you adrenal surge them, they put in like 13 or 14 lethal hits. And then of the remainder, they're gonna hand you another like, I don't know, 3-4 mortal wounds. So the actual damage from the Gene Stealer unit is like 11 going through onto the Feel No Pain. So yeah, they're probably good for like 8 damage out of the Gene Stealers alone, and then you get a little bit more out of the Broodlord too.
At Buckethoff Steel Sybil donated $6.99 through Super
The
Chat.
damage 30 Hormigaunt.
To the strength
How
26
could we forget?
AP4 damage 30 Hormigaunt.
How could we forget about the damage 30 Hormigaunt? It's like damage reduction this, idiot. Boop. Just one taps the Nightbringer. It's like not even that close. You're pretty. You hit on. The problem is you got to hit on 4, but you wound on a 2. If he fails to save, he's almost certainly dead. He's like 95% chance he dies. Easy. Tyranids should beat everything, honestly. If you just take hundreds of Hormigants that are strength 26, damage 30. How could we have forgotten, chat, about how strong this faction is? They should just let Emperor's Children have Predators and Forge Fiends. The Forge Fiend thing blows my fucking mind. That's crazy. Because, like, so many people have Emperor's Children and Forge Fiends from, like, back in the day. Because, first of all, Slaanesh used to be the shooting faction. Like, the shooting, like, sub-faction out of Chaos Space Marines. Which was, like, good. It was, like, Nurgle was tanky, Khorne was fighty, Tzeentch was psychic, and Slaanesh was shooty. So you got all the different sub-factions figured out. But then they were like, we're getting rid of psychic attacks. So Tzeentch has to be shooty now. And also Nurgle is shooty for some reason. And they just like muddled all the sub-factions. And then everyone forgot that Slaanesh used to be the one that shot you to fucking death. We can talk about the remnant of the Meraviglia combo, but from back in like late 8, early 9th edition. Crazy. Absolutely insane amounts of damage for Noise Marines. Wild. And so when they were like, new book coming out, you're not shooty anymore. And you're like, do you remember not long ago when it being Emperor's Children meant you could shoot twice in the shooting phase? Literally anything in the army could shoot again. Like insanity. It's just wild. I don't know. Also 5-man Terminators. Yeah. Also Emperor's Children bikes. Yeah. It makes no sense. Well, I guess also like we're probably going to redo Chaos Space Marine bikes at some point. The Chaos Space Marine biker models, not the best thing in the range here, chant. Can we find? They're still on the web store. This is the greatest day of my life. Look at these guys. Glorious. They're absolutely glorious, chat. Look at their teeny legs. Their teeny tiny little legs. We love them. We stand Chaos Bikers. A Chaos Invader ATV with a Sonic Blaster on top? That'd be sick. Pew pew. Yeah. You could swap Emperor's Children World Eater rules and it would make perfect sense. Yeah. That's true, actually. Yeah. Like, World Eaters are just really fast. Okay, I get it. That makes sense. And Emperor's Children are all about like doing cool like martial stances to get lethal hits and sustained hits. All right, that tracks. Yeah, that's unironically true. That makes me sad. World Eaters with coterie would be fun. Indeed. If they still had Forge Fiends, that would be cool. Chaos Bikers have the proportions of a Lego minifigure. That's so true. Can't unsee that now. That's absolutely correct. I like too that like they are basically just the old Space Marine biker, but it's clearly a different like model, right? It has like the chaos bits on it. It's got like they're sitting on like human skin as their bike seat. I guess they reused the tires, and that was like the only part. Pretty interesting. Also, these old heavy metal paint jobs are like wild. They just dry brush the inside. They're like, that's fine. Just give it a quick once over. The tire, just paint it matte black. It looks fine. Move on. Incredible. You wouldn't be caught dead doing that these days. Also, drilled gun barrels, which has always sort of thrown me for a loop. I also love that they're like really messy. There's like splotches of black from when they like fix stuff up all over the place over here. The little screws on the backpack, they're just splotchy. They're just all over the place. This looks like a paint job I did. It looks incredible. The pictures are probably taken in 2005. Well, the paint job was probably from 2005. I think that they redid them because they changed their basing scheme for these things like at some point. And I think I think what they likely did is they retouched the model, which is why it's like a little bit funny looking, and then they built a new base for it. I think you can even see it. I think paint is peeled on the tires, so they probably stripped it from the previous base and then didn't touch up that piece of the tire. That's actually fucking hilarious. That's really funny. How many mid paint jobs you can find on the website? Oh, you just look at any of the old stuff, right? It looks okay. It looks like totally whatever. You want to see Imperial Agents? We can look at Imperial Agents for a sec, chat. Let me just pull it up real quick here. So this list won the event it was going to. It was a smaller event. It was like an RTT. It was Joseph Salt who did it, who played it. Played Imperialis Fleet with a Calidus, Eversor, Clandestine Operation Inquisitor, 2 more Inquisitors, Inquisitor Draxus, a Navigator with Combat Landing, and then 1 Rogue Trader Entourage. We have Navy Breachers times 1, 2, 3. And then Chimeras times 2. Immolators times 2. A bunch of agents. 2 units of 10 agents. 2 units of 10 Sisters of Battle. A Subductor Squad. Or a bunch of Subductor Squads, I guess. Plus Void's Men-at-Arms. Just a million units everywhere. Just everywhere. All over the place. You can get some work done with the Breacher teams. So, like, we can attach the Inquisitors into them, and then the Breachers get wound rerolls on objectives, and the Inquisitors shoot the Devastating Wound Shockwave gun. Similar thing from Inquisitor Draxus as well. So, you could just, like, plow into people with that. You have, like, the really tanky Rogue Trader Entourage unit that can redeploy itself. I guess any of the character units can redeploy after you shoot them. So you can, like, play a little aggressively and then pop away when they attack, or reactive move when they attack you. And then you just have so many models everywhere that you're able to hold objectives pretty easily. Is this detachment also give you... It's sustained and lance on an objective, right? And then you can get an invulnerable save on an objective if you pick it as your detachment ability. Yeah, so... Start of the fight phase, you can select a unit, get +1 to hit against that unit, or you can select an objective... get +1 OC and a 5+ invulnerable save on that objective. So it's just a bunch of shit that's good at taking your objectives away. And I think that's probably why it was successful here. Is like if you're playing into like 3 C'tan shards, the general OC of that list is very low, and so you might be able to, like, with your powers combined, you throw a bunch of like their little silly grenades and you devastating wound them. You might be able to kill 1 of the C'tan shards just by throwing enough mortal wounds at them that they'll die. And then for the rest of the game, you're just like, the objective that guy's holding, I'll pick +1 OC and run 2 Breachers onto it, and it's mine now. Take that. And then your opponent's like, I hate this. This sucks. And you're like, yep, get wrecked. Seems okay. Pretty upset at the new Custodies. Okay. Cool. They look good, though, chat, so... Sucks to suck, I guess. Anyway, chat. Do to be Necron at TXO Chaos Space Marines? Hell yeah. Yeah, Chaos Space Marines also did fairly well. There were a couple of different Chaos Space Marine lists that had wins in the matchup. And a lot of it was because they could just give lethal hits to anything, which is very nice. So I think that's the discussion for today, chat. I don't have much else to say about it. My cat's here. She wants to say goodbye to everyone. Oh, what's up, baby? Oh, you want to say goodbye to chat? You big fuzzy ball. We talked about C'tan shards. Are you a C'tan shard? I think you are, probably. Hi. What's up, kitty? Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'm gonna be live over on Twitch in about half an hour. Any subterranean assault? No, it was all invasion fleet as far as I could see. Ooh. Actually, she liked this yesterday. Yeah, meow. She went up on my shoulder and then she got a big pat. This is what she really wants. I'm gonna be live playing against Tyranids in about 30 minutes over on Twitch. So as always, I'll drop a link to my Twitch. We also had last minute schedule. Got a here we go. We also got a finals game scheduled basically last minute this evening. So it's basically going to be live streams over on Twitch from like the entire day. So if you want to go come watch some 40K, we're going to be streaming Salamanders versus Tyranids. That's going to be my game. And then we'll have a commentated game that is, let me grab it. I'll grab the matchup for you real quick. That's going to be the Pod 62 finals, I think, which is Leagues of Votann into it's Ultramarines, but is it cool Ultramarines? It's Hellblaster Ultramarines. There's actually 20 Hellblasters in this list and no Victrix Honor Guard. So that's kind of sick, actually. That's what we call classy Ultramarines, is no Victrix Honor Guard. Or Calgar, actually. So, you know what? Is it even Ultramarines at that point? I don't know. It is playing Blade of Ultramar and with Robotic Element, but it's not a lot of non-standard stuff. So that actually makes me happy. I like that. That's sweet. 20 Hellblasters versus 20 Hearthguard. Who will beat the plasma shots? Who has more plasma? The real brain of the stream, indeed. Absolutely. All right, chat. Let's go ahead and hop off, everybody. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there.